When we arrived in Rockhampton in 1980, we had just spent 2.5 years away from Australia. We'd spent 1 year in Singapore in that very diverse society, and then another 18 months over in London, enjoying the sights and sounds of such a fantastic city. But my husband stood on the top of Mount Archer, having come from the population of Australia in London and 2.5 million people in Singapore, stood on the top of Mount Archer and said, "Oh my God, is this all there is?" But everybody was so friendly and welcoming here. We were invited to come to Rockhampton by the obstetricians and gynecologists in Rockhampton, and which was Con Primer and Tom Dewar and John Burks, and they helped us to settle into Rockhampton, and we were really happy to be here, and we found it a very welcoming place. And what did I find when we first moved here? We found that there was a very welcoming Chinese community here. I had never encountered Australian-born Chinese in the community before, and it was just fascinating to hear their stories and to be welcomed by these people into the Chinese Association, as it was at the time. And we were the first Chinese specialist to actually set up a practice, in fact the first specialist to set up a practice on the north side of Rockhampton in Elphinstone Street. We first set up in Musgrave Street, on the site where the Oriental restaurant had been, the first Chinese restaurant in Rockhampton. And then we moved down to Elphinstone Street, and not far from where KP had his practice. People were warm and friendly. We found there were very good schools. We didn't encounter any racism to start with, but we encountered it a little bit along the way. But we sailed past that, because generally people have been warm and friendly. I wasn't prepared for the shock of the humidity in summer, but you grow mangoes and lychees here, so that was okay. And we finally got air conditioning, which was even better. So we coped, and it was a very busy time. We were having our children, and it was good to have these lovely people in the community to get along with and bring up the children and have their friends. What was Rockhampton like? There wasn't very much Chinese food, but we'll come to that very shortly. And yeah, I was really pleased to start learning about the history of Rockhampton. It's got such a fascinating history. The biggest change I've seen in Rockhampton that made a difference to not only me but to our family was the availability of Chinese food. When we first came to Rockhampton, to find a Chinese cabbage, unless you grew it yourself, they were not in the shops. The ingredients that we had for making dishes in Singapore and in London, because there's a large Chinese community in London, they just weren't available in Rockhampton, and even the market gardeners were providing for the Western taste rather than the Chinese taste. To get gailan, to get wombok, was impossible, as I said, unless you grew it yourself. But very shortly afterwards, I think Ah Heng from Food Sing started a little shop down by the riverbank in Rockhampton and started bringing in Chinese ingredients and Asian ingredients, and it just made such a difference to the flavours of the dishes I was cooking. Unless I went to Brisbane and went to the supermarkets there and hauled it all the way back, you couldn't, you know.
We had to do that, obviously.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, mostly you're cooking Western food, and I did feel sorry for my husband, who did miss his Because Singapore has so many flavours. It's such a multicultural, diverse community with so many dishes from around the world available, to not only the local dishes, but international, just food heaven. Now, I had to think long and hard about that question because I didn't grow up here, so I've got 40 years here. And in my view of things, that's not a very long time. But
You're the second person to say that.
I know. But do you know what I miss the most? I miss the people who were here when I first came here. So those people have actually passed on. They've either died or they have moved away. Like my friends that my kids grew up with have moved to Melbourne or wherever because their kids moved down there and stayed there because the jobs that their kids got weren't available here. So my kids don't live here because the jobs they've been trained for aren't available in Rockhampton. And the people like the Fordays, Albie Forday passing away was a real heartbreaking for me. Ray Young passed away last year. Wyn Forday has moved down to be with her, she's in her 90s, she's moved to be with her family in Brisbane. And some of the people who've moved away I've been able to catch up with. The restaurants, the Chinese restaurants are leaving town. The places like Ocean City, the Waha, the Hong Kong seafood, those people have left. Judy Wong's left town, but I'm in contact with them and I catch up with them. But I do miss them and their food and their restaurants. Do you know, even at this moment, our Chinese Association president is out there in the Chinese community helping them with their census questions because we organised a workshop or invited the census people to come to our Chinese community when we were making our zongzi, our dumplings for the Dragon Boat Festival, to talk about the census being taken. Because coming from China, where the government is documenting every step of everything that you do in your life and do not step out of turn there, to come to Australia and say to them, the government wants to record everything that you're doing and where you're living, is a bit intimidating for them. So we needed to say to them and explain to them how the data will be used and why they're collecting the data and why it's going to improve the services in the town if you answer these questions. So that's one way that we're supporting. Our community has been supportive. We started and initiated a domestic violence collection, not a domestic violence collection, but a collection for the victims of domestic violence to send the goods and the basic goods to the refuges. And so the Chinese shops and people in the community would be the collection points for the donations, and then we would get together and take them over to the places like the Helen Yumba Centre or the police station to disperse to the community. We're helping each other. We've helped the police when members in the community have run into strife. I remember one case where a woman was murdered and her daughter had to come up to Rockhampton not only to identify the body but also to be part of that processing, and they were from China. And it just helped to have the translation services and support services there for her in the community. So just in small ways, I know that we've fundraised for over the years. The Chinese community's been in Rockhampton. There's a picture in the library of the 1915 Belgian Day parade where the Chinese community is parading through to collect money and donating themselves, small amounts even, to send to the Belgian Day Relief Fund in 1915. Before that, they were donating to build a hospital, to the benevolent funds, to flood victims. So they've been supporting each other and their neighbours in the community for as long as they've been here. They do it very quietly. They don't ask for any recognition. They don't want to make the waves. They just want to be part of the community. I think the story of our Chinese temple and its locations belongs and deserves a place in Rockhampton's history, and it's part of Rockhampton's heritage. I've just researched over the last couple of years, and I've been so indebted to the Rockhampton Southside Library, to the Central Queensland Family History Association, to the Rockhampton Historical District, what is that name of that place? This Rockhampton District Historical Association, Society, and to the elders in the community, and to people in the community who have, and to the State Archives, the State Library, the Museum of Maps in Brisbane, who have helped document the story of the altars sites around Rockhampton. It started out at Pink Lily when Charles Tang Suyek, a very respected and notable Chinese person in Rockhampton's history, came and built a small temple on land that he was leasing from the government at Pink Lily next to the Lotus Lagoon. When he passed away and the temple was, then the land was passed on to other people at auction and they wanted it for other things, then they had to move the altar into town for safekeeping. Ray Young's father, Willie Young, kept it next to his shop, in a shed next to his shop in Alma Lane. And there was a gambling den opposite, run by Louis Sanchong. And Ray Young's father would look after the elderly Chinese people in the community because they had no family here. They weren't allowed to bring their family out to Australia because of the White Australia policy. And he would look after these elderly gentlemen. He'd get them to cut up the fruit for his shop and for fruit salad, and he would sell that. And they would play cards in the gambling den over the road, and that would raise money to build the next Chinese temple, which was in Borden Street. It was on the corner of Borden and Bedford Streets. They bought 2 acres of land there and built a Chinese temple. It was a fibrillite high-set building in 1941. So they moved it over there in 1941, and there was a caretaker there. And people knew him as Georgie, but the Chinese people called him Ah Gong, which means grandfather in Chinese, in Cantonese. And he would ride his wagon and horse across the river with the vegetables he grew in a market garden on the 2 acres of land in Borden Street. But like all of us, time takes its toll. And from 1941 to the 1970s, he's aged 30 years. And he can no longer keep up that pace of digging for vegetables, digging up the gardens for the vegetables and looking after the place. And he's getting old, and even though he's bringing out his grandchildren to help him, they're not interested in making a living from that. Supermarkets are coming into town. So the rates fell into arrears, and the Chinese community at the time thought, well, we've got to do something. We've got to, we're still Taoists, we're still praying at this temple, we need to do something. So they built another temple, having sold the land to the Queensland government to extend the oval of the Berserker State School, and moved it into Bedford Street, which backs, this temple land backs onto the Berserker State School. I think they moved a lot of soil to build up the grounds there because a creek used to run through it, and they demolished the old building. As I said, they put the soil over the top of it, so there's no foundations left at all. And so the school got a lovely playground, and the Chinese community got a new hall. And they put the beautiful altar into that new hall, and that altar has its own feng shui. It faces directly south. it faces across the river and it faces to the mountains. And it's dedicated to the deity Chen Lao Gung, who was a warrior in medieval times in China. But he was killed by bandits, and he was known to be like the Robin Hood of the communities in China. So disaster strikes later on in China's history, where there's a plague going through, an epidemic going through the capital, and the emperor's looking for cures for this. And so the people said, well, you should try this fellow. This fellow, the villagers have been praying to this deity called Chen Lao Gung, and he is in down in the Guangdong area, old Canton area. Bring this deity up to Beijing, and this fellow that they're praying to Beijing, and he will rid you of the epidemic, which he did. And so he deified him, and so everybody was excited, and they built a lot of temples to Chen Lao Gung in the Pearl River Delta. 1900 in Rockhampton, bubonic plague breaks out, and the Chinese community, remember, there are no antibiotics. There is only hope and prayers. And they bring out their Chinese deity and parade him through the streets. But they also commission to bring out the altar to Australia, which they brought over in 1901, the first part, and in 1903, the second part. And that's what went to Pink Lily, went to then Alma Lane, then over to Borden Street, and now resides this heritage, this beautiful heritage, beautifully painted altar, which is gilded, but it's been painted in past times, resides at 152 Bedford Street, North Rockhampton. You know, there's a comedian that's on Facebook, and she's bagging Rockhampton something terrible. And other people have come into town who are outsiders, have come into town and say, oh, this is not a good place. But I tell you what, my daughter went to work for Google. She graduated from the Rockhampton Girls Grammar School here. My son has been able to have a really good education. The other children in town, Rockhampton is such a cultural birthplace for so many activities. And think about our sporting people. We've got hockey players, we've got tennis players, we've got, swimmers that have come from Rockhampton. We've got dancers. Mary McKendry, bowed to Male's Last Dancer. He said she's a better dancer than he ever was. I mean, amazing. We've got actors. Lynette Forday she was with the ballet, did ballet, but then went on to become an actor, was starring in Shortland Street, still an actress over in New Zealand. The heritage, the cultural and of Rockhampton, unless you live here and give it a go, you don't realise what a little gem of a place this is. Summer aside, fabulous winters. You've got the beach down the road. You've got access to the west. An hour on the plane, you're in Brisbane, and then anywhere in the world. Amazing airport, amazing train station. I think, and we've got an art gallery with some of the best artwork in the place. I just think this has been such a hidden gem in all of Australia, and outsiders don't stay here long enough to find out what makes the city tick. We've got generous hearts in our community, and people are looking to other influences and saying, oh, you can't be multicultural. But we've got such a wonderful, diverse community here. We're having Taste of the World Festival run by the Multicultural Association in a couple of weeks, and people will flock to the place and enjoy tasting food from around the world and the arts and culture that these different places bring to it. When we had Barbara Harwood on the Rockhampton Tourist and Development Board in the 1990s to early 2000, she organised a street festival for Rockhampton for a Chinese New Year. We expected 5,000 people to turn up to that festival, and we catered for 5,000 people. 23,000 people came to that festival. I have never done so much running in all my life. We had to go to the restaurants, and they were cooking flat out all night to supply the food for the people at the festival. So people love the diversity of the cultures that we have in Rockhampton. I think 100 years from now, I'd love to be around to see it, to see that we've grown in our diverse community and how much we respect and do take care of each other. You know, we've had disasters come to Rockhampton. We have a flood. These once in 100-year floods, I'd like to take a debate on that. But, you know, when the floods happen, people take care of each other during those times, don't they? They rally together and they get behind each other and are very supportive. We have a beef week every couple of years, and people from around the world come to our beef week and appreciate what Rockhampton has to offer. I think that we need more development as far as places and venues to hold these great exhibitions. We could be a lot more. I know Barbara was pushing for a bigger place to hold conventions and, you know, saying the old saying, build it and they will come. I think that needs to be, in 100 years' time, have that sort of infrastructure. You know, it's been a great place to bring up children. I think people will always find it's been a great place to bring up children and have that great pool of brains here and art and gifted people that come into our community and share. So I hope that continues for the next 100 years.